Hi, I'm Kim. I thought I'd share a little bit about my experience working with parents in counselling and also supervising counsellors who are not sure how they'll go making that phone call to a parent after they've seen the child, or how they'll even respond to a parent that phones and says, "I need you to help. I've got a problem with my child." So when I speak to a parent for the first time, I use what David Epstein calls the wonderfulness interview. So I say to them, look, before you share what the problem is and what the problem's been and your worries generally about your child and how it's impacting the family, would you mind sharing with me what's wonderful about your child? And this engages a different part of the brain of the parent. So often people become stuck in a pattern of thinking in a certain way about an individual. We all know that from a workplace situation or, family gatherings. There's usually one person who completely takes over, and we can just build on to negative stories that we hear. So parents are in the same boat too. They're living 24/7 with a child or young person, and the pattern will be to dump onto you, the counsellor, all the things that's wrong from the parent's point of view. Whereas we can begin our meeting with this family by listening out for what's wonderful about the child or young person. And then when they've shared a couple of stories, we can thank them, and obviously we're listening out in a special way for strengths, qualities, things the parent admires. Now, whatever they say is wonderful about their child actually is like a checklist of the family values. So then we can ask, is there something in particular you'd like me to, focus on when I'm working with your child? I won't be able to share with you what we're working on and how we're talking in depth because of confidentiality. If there's something that I think you need to know, if it's a safety issue, then I'll say to the child or young person, I think we need to talk to mum or dad about this. And what do you think? And we'll work out a way and find a script that I can relay to you. Perhaps it's your child is having thoughts of self-harm or is getting threatened by somebody online or at school. But it's really important that that young person or child in front of me knows that I'm not going to be passing information on to parents. The other thing I do is I say to them, look, is this a good time for you to work with me for several months? Because generally that's what we're looking at. We're looking at maybe 4 to 6 sessions to get a real sense for what's possible. Are you as a parent kind of ready, capable and willing to make some changes as well? Because if I see your child once a week or once a fortnight for an hour, a lot's going to go on in between time at home, at school, and it would be great if before the next session there's someone working collaboratively with me behind the scenes. So again, you can't have an expectation that a parent will say, yes, I'll do anything, I'll change anything, because that's not the reality. Parents have their own issues. They're being triggered by traumas. A really good question to ask a parent actually is, so your child's 10. Can I ask, when you were 10, what was happening for you? So that kind of conversation's quite revealing. The other thing I do ask about is, could we make a couple of minutes now to talk about the pregnancy? Is that okay? And even conception, I'll ask, was the child conceived in love? Was she an accident? Not that I'm going to share them with the child, but they make up the context, the background to all these issues that come up later. And the other thing that's quite helpful with parents is to say, look, when you were growing up and you were looking at your family and how they interacted at family gatherings or at breakfast or at dinner, or how they managed, who had the remote control, or who chose which television channel to use, or were holidays a really exciting time, or were they plagued with problems? Could you tell me a couple of things about your own experience of being a child in a family? So we're not going into therapy with the parent, but again, what can happen is the parent starts to talk about their own childhood, and like the penny drops, they generally will say, oh, this is a pattern repeating. We don't have to say it to them. They often see that, but we must make space for the parent for these kind of conversations. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of what kind of conversations these can be. And I usually end by saying, look, if you found this helpful today, this 20-minute call or this hour, we might have had an hour on Zoom or a phone call that's been half an hour. If you found this helpful, would you like to do this again in maybe 4 or 6 weeks? And, call it a check-in if you like. And I'll be letting your child know that in a few weeks I'll be having like a check-in with mum and dad. And we'll see how we go. What do you think about that? Check in with the child. Is that okay? Or especially once they reach about 15, 16, they don't want you to do anything with mum and dad. And that's fine too. Yeah, that's fine too. The other thing I don't want to forget now, before we finish this little tutorial about working with parents, is it's really important to ask up front. If the parents are separated, it's really important to say, are there any family court orders in place? Because if there's a family court order that says both parents need to consent to counselling, you are breaking the law if you only get verbal or written consent from the mother or just the father. So please ask that question, are there any family court orders in place? And if they say yes, so what does it say about consent for counselling? And the other thing is to find a way to naturally ask, have there ever been any intervention orders? So is there any kind of history of, any violence at home, or any kind of things that it would be really helpful for me to know? So I hope this has been helpful for you. Thank you for listening.